I moved to Cincinnati not too long after I divorced my now ex-husband, along with the passing of my late father. All I had left was my mother, though her and I were never as close as I was with Dad. It's been about 4 years since finalizing the divorce papers. My ex-husband kept the house, but I was able to split the equity on it and cash out, enough to put a down payment on a small 2-bed, 1-bath home here in Ohio. With no kids to fight for and bring with me, I'm all alone here, or so I think. It started yesterday. I woke up for work and was following my normal routine when I noticed it. A collage of framed pictures on one of my walls looked different. It wasn't like I'd put it up. I had no reason to move them around anyways. I'm still confused when I think about it. I honestly don't know if I'd done it. There's no way someone broke into my home to do something like that. For some relief, I called my mother, already knowing how that would turn out. She was never very supportive. We argued a ton, so when I called her and told her what happened, it did more harm than good. She had me second-guessing myself. I hung up and decided to get to work before I had more problems, like getting fired. Work was a drag. I'd been working on a few accounts, just trying to stay awake. Then I got a phone call. It was no caller ID, and I don't usually answer those, but I was so bored. Thought it was probably a scammer, and I could just waste their time for the fun of it. When I answered the phone, nobody spoke, but there was 100% someone else on the other end of the line. I could hear them breathing. Textbook movie scenario. I hung up. They never called again, though it got me thinking. What if the person who called was also the person who might have broken into my home and touched my pictures? Then I thought about being so far away from home. Maybe they'd come back. Maybe they were watching me. And what was I to do being so far away? The drive's like an hour. I know I'd locked all the doors this time, so unless there's a master lockpicker or something, I severely doubted I wouldn't be able to have proof this time that it all wasn't in my head. With that in mind, I trudged through the rest of my workload until the clock hit 5, then made my way home. Pulling up to the house, everything appeared untouched from the outside. Door was still locked. No windows were shattered. So far, so good. Stepping inside, I did what I usually did, putting my purse and keys on the kitchen counter before heading to the bedroom to change into my after-work attire. And that's when I found someone had been in my kitchen. The chairs and china from my cabinets were stacked up. Whoever did it must have taken at least an hour. Who knows what else they did? I carefully put everything back up and did a full sweep of the house. I don't have a gun, so I resorted to my roller pin. Nobody was there, and nothing else was touched. I began to cry. Living alone has been tough, but this was making it worse. I called my mother, but it ended up being worse than before. There really wasn't much I could do. I just sat there in tears until I calmed down. When I did, I decided to hop on some emails for work. I really wish they'd pay me overtime, but I'm salary. They're lucky I do this crap for them. As I was sifting through that bottomless pit, one of them caught my eye. It looked like a phishing scam, but there was a video attached. It was blurred out, but if I hovered over it, I could preview it, so I did. I almost threw up in my mouth, even covering it for extra insurance. It was a video of me in the shower. The angle of the video appeared to be coming from the inside of my shower head. I called the police immediately. Flash forward to now, the next day if you've been listening. Nothing has been done. The police did a full report and made a sweep of the house, but that's all they could do. They suggested having an officer stay close by in an undercover cruiser to keep watch, which I agreed to. They thought they could at least catch the guy, or girl, sneaking around the property. But here's the thing. This morning, as I was getting ready for work, something was knocking inside the walls. Every room I went into, there was a knock. I pressed my ear against the wall, and I heard it, clear as day. It said, "Hello, my love." Rule number 1 for anyone chasing the dragon: pay off your debts and be on time, or else you'll end up like I did, lying in the mud, waiting for your tail to be ripped apart by a pig named Ham Chops, with nothing on but your underwear. They'll tell you it helps him chew faster, but I think they get a freaky kick out of it. Ham Chops started as a rumor on the street. There's a drug lord that runs this part of the Blue Valley, has been for as long as I've been alive. Chops is an understanding guy, the type to give second chances, thirds if he likes you. But don't be mistaken, because I learned the hard way. Chops' kindness isn't weakness. He's fair, but just. I'd call him God if it wasn't blasphemous. Word had gotten around that a young man had missed a few payments on a front Chops handed to him. The teller said they'd been the poor kid's final moments, eaten alive by this giant pig. Of course, it's hard to believe. I sure didn't believe it myself, but when I was head deep in the mud, that pig screaming right before it started tearing into my near-bare cheeks. I was like a born-again believer, and now here I am telling you, a disciple of the gospel of Chops, if you will. Rumor aside, people carried on with their business with Chops, including myself. I don't think anyone wanted to believe it, nor did they want to take their chance and fall to the same fate as that young man. I've been buying from Chops for a few years now. His stash didn't discriminate. There was something for everyone. If the world went bust, whether it be nuclear war, a comet, or whatever, he'd had enough of everything coming in and out the door to satisfy all the junkies for a few lifetimes over, I bet. My drug of choice has always been heroin, and unfortunately, it's a pretty expensive habit. Chops knows this selective users are also the most likely to bounce on payments, so he usually doesn't just give it out to anyone. You got to have decent credit with him, and I sure did. Like I said, I've been buying from him for a few years now. I'm guessing you're wanting to know how I got in deep trouble, nearly getting ravaged by a pig named Hamchops. How this all ends. Well, let's just say I was behind a few payments. By a few payments, the bankroll statement was in the negative, say about $8,000, and that was the wholesale price. Now, I'm not usually one to give excuses, but I truly was in a bind. When I bought the drugs, I'd been given 3 months to pay it back. 3 months came and went, and I had nothing to show for it. Chops, being the fair man he is, gave me another month. Same deal. The look on his face was beyond frustration. But he gave me a third shot. Another month, but with a warning. You could probably guess I was not going to make the deadline, and decided to pack up and head for somewhere else, as far as I could get before they caught on. I think Chops sensed I was desperate enough to get out of Dodge. I was in the middle of packing my bags when I'd gotten a knock on the door. I don't ever have visitors, so I knew who it was. No, it wasn't Chops, but I knew he'd sent someone. I didn't answer. In fact, I just sat there on my bed thinking if I waited long enough, they'd just leave me alone. Think I wasn't home and bring word back to Chops that I'd already bailed out of town. Then my front door sounded like it caved in. Chops sent more than just a couple of them. There were at least 10 guys in my house. I thought about grabbing my gun, but what was I about to do against 10 guys? The magazine in my pistol only held 9 bullets, and I can't pull off a scene from Wanted. I went ahead and let them take me. You'd think they'd cut me some slack since I didn't put up a fight. Instead, they stripped me down to my underwear and drugged me like a dead body out into my backyard. It was raining pretty hard, the dirt beginning to soften and cake into mud. Enough I could see a trail through as they were dragging me through it. When they were done, I heard one of them yell, "Ham!" There was a squeal around the house. I knew what it was, that giant pig. I tried scrambling for the fence but didn't get far. I took a hard hook on the right side of the jaw and plopped to the ground with my face in the mud. Hamchops was just screaming its head off. To this day, I still don't understand how nobody in the neighborhood called the cops, let alone said anything to anyone, especially with a 300-pound pig making enough noise it could double as a warning siren, one of them you hear when a tornado touches the ground. When I say I've never seen a pig that big in my life, I mean it. I think you could throw a saddle on it and ride it at the rodeo. When they brought it around the corner of the house, I just about soiled myself, petrified and pale as a ghost. It had the meanest look in its eyes, like someone had been juicing it like one of those bodybuilders, and it was ready to let all that anger out, like a pressure cooker. 4 men had their own leash hooked up to the collar around its neck. I can't make this up. When Hamchop saw me, it started pulling and jerking, almost pulling one of the guys to the ground. I knew I was dinner, and it wasn't waiting for nobody. The guy started laughing like it was all a joke. There was no doubt in my bones that I was screwed. I thought about all the mistakes I'd made in my life, all the wrongs, and how I'd do it differently if I had a second shot. Hopeless was what I was, but I was no longer desperate. I accepted it, you see. You can't always win, can't always get away with it. Sometimes you've got to face the music, own up to it, no matter the consequences. Better to die honest than not. That pig pulled its way towards me, closer and closer by the second. My face pressed on its side in the mud. I looked up to the sky, felt the cool drops against my skin. Someone's cell rang, and before I could say Jack Robinson, they pulled me up by my underwear and took me to see Chops. Remember when I said Chops is a firm believer in second chances? Thirds if he likes you? Well, I guess I'm the exception. Fourth time's the charm. I didn't end up being pig feed like I thought. I work for Chops now, as a settlement to my debts. It's a good gig, and it's more than fair. I'm basically a debt collector. Ironic, right? Unfortunately, there's a poor fellow who's missing a few payments, and I heard Ham Chops was hungry. Chops didn't want to give this guy more than a second chance, and like I said, he's as fair as he is just. I know that for a fact.